My name is Lucas Hagen. I'm the Creative Industries Program Manager here at Swissnex, and I'm excited to welcome you all to the second iteration of this roundtable series. About a year ago, we launched a global dialogue on the Museum of the Future, and this year we're continuing this conversation with Switzerland's leading art museums and partners from around the world. And that's also why we're building this conversation on sound. Jason Reinier approached us with the concept of sonostalgia. This term sonostalgia, coined by Jason, describes sound longing, the way certain sounds and soundscapes carry comfort, memory, and meaning, and the impulse to preserve and share them. And we want to ask the guiding question here, what happens when we put sound first? And we want to see what happens if we imagine a new museum in terms of what it could look like and what it could sound like. And we are already seeing that these conversations are sparking new collaborations, new communities, and ideas. Today, for the second iteration, we want to focus on sound and space, and we're organizing and co-hosting this series together with our colleagues at Swissnex in Boston and New York, and we're very thankful for that collaboration. Now, just a few words on what is Swissnex. Swissnex is an initiative by the Swiss State Secretary for Education, Research and Innovation. And our mission is to connect the Swiss innovation ecosystem with relevant hubs and partners around the world, including here in the Bay Area, as well as the US East Coast, but also in China, India, Brazil, and Japan. And we believe that we can drive innovation and we can have real breakthroughs at the intersection of startups, academia, the creative industries, and the arts. And that's also what brings us here today. We have an interesting panel of artists, composers, creative technologists, and researchers here with us today. We're joined by Nina Emge, Chris Chafe, Christopher Salter, and our moderator for the series, Joseph Becker. Additionally, we are joined today by the contributors of our first roundtable, Francesca and Jason, who will focus on the act of listening. Hence, they're participating as listeners. We're very grateful for you all to be here. And with that, I would like to hand over things to you, Joseph.
Thanks, Lucas. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here for the second roundtable. This has been a really eye and ear-opening experience as we've navigated and explored the different avenues of sonification and the relationship of sound to our emotional and cultural experiences. This session, we're going to look at ideas and conditions of space. We're going to think a little bit about the relationship of the physical and the digital, and those shared overlapping experiences or the ways that we move between them, as well as the ideas of storytelling and the science of sonification. So we're here bringing different voices together, spatial design, ritual, forms of participation, different voices talking about their approaches to sound as we expand the idea of the Sound Museum. I'm here in San Francisco, so just to introduce myself before we introduce the panelists, I am Curator of Architecture and Design at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And our Sound Museum Roundtable number 1, we talked a little bit about the role of exhibition making in bringing sound to the foreground. And I currently have an exhibition on view at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum called Art of Noise, which looks specifically at the relationships of design and music. So today we're hearing from some really wonderful panelists, starting with Nina Emge, who's a Zurich-based artist who reflects on the social dimensions of sound and voice and silence and the practices of listening. Her work is centered around issues such as decentralization and shared working methods and redistribution. And she's a member of the Transnational Sound Initiative. Nina's exhibited all over the world and will share a little bit of her practice with us this morning, and will be followed by Chris Chafe, who is a composer, an improviser, a cellist, and develops much of his music alongside his computer-based research. He's the chair of Stanford University's Department of Music and works at the Center for Computer Research, Music, and Acoustics, called CARMA, at Stanford as well. He's been a visiting scholar around the world, as well as a visiting professor, and it will be sharing a little bit of his technical explorations, engaging in the digital space and thinking about the physical space. We're also joined by Christopher Salter in Zurich as well, who is a professor for immersive arts and the director of the Immersive Arts Space at the Zurich University of the Arts, as well as a professor emeritus for design and computation arts at Concordia University in Montreal. Christopher is going to be sharing a bit about his artistic practice as well as his academic practice, sharing with us an incredible installation. So we are going to experience things through this Zoom space that are blending, this idea of attempting to be physical in a digital space. And so we'll go through a little bit of an introduction from each of them about their practices. We'll save a little bit of time for conversation as well as questions from participants and the audience. And then we'll have a great opportunity to pass the Zoom space over to Jason Reinier, who was one of the panelists on the first sound panel. And as Lucas mentioned, has kind of brought us all together around the idea of sonostalgia. Jason is on site at Karma this morning, and we will be bringing this group, this Zoom space group, into their acoustic laboratory to attempt to experience what they're doing there. Jason is here as a listener, but may chime in with some of his own thoughts as we conclude the session. We're also joined by Francesca Ceccherini, who was also a panelist on the first session and is the founder of the Otto Sound Museum in Zurich. So we're trying to bring everybody together in this really wonderful opportunity to think more deeply about sound. And with that, I'll pass it over to Nina to tell us a little bit about her work.
Thank you very much. I'll just start my presentation. So today I would like to introduce you to the exhibition It's Never Too Late to Stop, Look and Listen, which took place January 31st and lasted until 1st of April 2022. During the exhibition, we were going through the Omicron mutation of the coronavirus. As we had been planning the exhibition since 2019, we knew that we had to reflect key aspects of the exhibition in a way that granted a form of access. So what we see now is the exhibition space. We see a used dance carpet and 3 sculptures that stand in relation to percussion instruments. So we therefore decided to host the second part of the exhibition, which developed into a decentralized radio station called 17 Days, in brackets piano version. Together with Timo Nesungo and I, we programmed this decentralized radio station that hosted 18 shows and was broadcasted on 10 radio stations. So over the course of 3 months, we collaborated with Internet Public Radio, THF Radio, MASEF, Shanghai Community Radio, Radio 40, Al-Hara, Radio Laura, and Kashmir Radio. So over the course of this exhibition, we add 2 shows per week on those 10 radio stations, which were mentioned. So, and you also see all the collaborators on the slide. And I thought when I received this invitation that Yeah, I would like to dive into the radio part of this exhibition because those questions came up to me during the process of developing the exhibition, but also after. So how do we share an audience? Also, and if I say we, I mean we as artists. So, and which spaces can we use to redistribute resources, whatever resource we need or have to share? And how can we use our resources to extend our network? Yeah, all these questions became clear or more important to me during the preparation and still are quite important to me to that day. And a year later, Centre Culturel Suisse invited me to perform at Frac Bretagne in Rennes while they were touring their institution due to renovation in Paris. So as I really like the idea of using self-organized radio stations or independent radio stations as a sort of tool, I extended my invitation and gave a carte blanche to Tatiomiel, Suto, Soraya, Lutango Bonaventure, Jamira Estrada, and Golce, who each contributed a 20 minutes musical composition. Each piece was streamed at 2 p.m. Through one of the collaborating radio stations, which were Radio Al-Harra, Kashmir Radio, Ola Radio, Radio 40, and Dublab Radio at Frac Bretagne. All musical compositions were heard simultaneously in the auditorium through their own speakers. So we had 5 speakers in the auditorium seats and people could walk around or sit in the spot they chose. Genau, and this is how the piece Recollecting Memories from 1 to 5 or FM Online Quintet happened, and I quickly translated the text that they wrote about me because I thought it was also somehow soothing and interesting to reread it and to also re-reflect it. So Nina Emge presents a sound work that focuses primarily on the question, what does it mean to listen? To put this question into context, the work will be broadcasted on several radio stations, which will be brought together within the exhibition space. Here, Nina Imge reflects on aspects of decentralization, redistribution, and accessibility. And the question that I brought or wanted to bring into our space today was, what happens if we use radio stations, for example, as a quote-unquote musician, or who has access to a piece, a performance, or a concert, and who do I want to address? So it was also, little side note, Radio Du from Paris recorded the whole piece and also an interview about it. So there's like this, there's some radio layers, but that's it from my side for now.
Nina, are there places where we could, on our own, tune in to this radio station?
Yes. So, or maybe I go back to it. Up. If you Google Little Star DUUUU, you'll find the radio station, and this is the interface of Halle für Kunst Lüneburg, which is the institution or was the institution where the exhibition took place. And on their website, all the radio shows are documented and accessible. Genau. Halle für Kunst Lüneburg and Du. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. We'll continue through the introductions from Chris and Christopher and then loop back and discuss everybody's work together. So, Chris, why don't you take us away?
Okay. We'll do. Going to pull up a slideshow as well. And that's not it. Hold on a sec. Okay, there. And it's great to have the opportunity to follow Nina because she's in this world that she describes that's similar to a world that I'm plumbing in some of the work I'll describe here. And the first thing I'll do is sort of suggest a couple things that participants can do. One is if you have a separate device and you can go to this QR code, you'll get a synthesizer on your phone, which is the subject of the next few minutes here. The other thing that I'll suggest is for the Zoom, for your sort of best listening, if you have earbuds or headphones, take advantage of those for now. You'll hear some stereophonic stuff in my presentation, but when we get to Karma, you'll be listening to binaural audio, which really prints nicely in headphones and not so nicely over loudspeakers. So this is a QR code that, as I said, leads you to a synthesizer that you can push a play button with. If you scroll around, you'll see it, and it's a mesh synthesis running in a web browser on your cell phone. It's kind of the latest thing that I'm working on in a way, but let me rewind to kind of where I'm starting. And this goes back kind of before the age of humanity even. I like to think about physics of the natural world and the sound objects out there. So without any great depth, I would say that things can generally categorize into 1 dimension or 2 dimension or 3 dimensions. 1 dimension resonator would be like a stick, and it's long and thin, and you bang on it, and it has a resonance and a pitch to it. 2 dimensions, kind of earliest pieces of a 2 dimension, I think might be a plate of schist, a piece of rock that has a sound when you hit it. 3 dimensions, a little more interesting if you think about the resonance in air. So you go into a cave and you hear the resonance of a cave in 3 dimensions. And then along came humans, and we started to manufacture material that could also have 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional properties that are interesting for sound. In 2 dimensions, the invention of like fired ceramics or making metal sheets. 3 dimensions, building acoustical rooms, houses that have auditoriums that we love to listen in, or large spaces, as we're going to talk about. So now this is going beyond just the material itself, but modeling the material. And this is one of my favorite examples of a gong being run in software. So if you can hear this well enough, it's a low sound. It's made through the animation of a mesh of points, totally a mathematical simulation. The next one is a much more efficient version of that. And I'm kind of blasting through some examples and talking over them. Sorry about that. And this one is very similar to what's running on the phone. Now, when we start looking at these things with analytic tools like we can then use to inform new synthesis models, we find things like the speed of sound in metal is different than the speed of sound in air. And when we make a model that is going to sound with something like that gong in the beginning, we need to do things that actually make that correspondence work. Our models get better. So now I'm dinging on something that has both of those speeds of sound incorporated in it. And this is where we kind of connect to the internet now. We've gone from numerical simulation in a computer to actually connecting a mesh of nodes out on the internet and sending sound around in the internet. And this is kind of my takeaway, is that the internet itself can become an acoustical medium. Great. Okay. So this is the numerical simulation. 2 dimensions. It's got that deep, low sound. And it's basically like, imagine your kitchen tiles vibrating. It's a mesh of points, rectangular mesh. And here's a small one. Okay. And then this is when we get the speed of sound right. And now when we put it on the internet, each of the points on the internet is like a crossroads between your kitchen tiles. And then this is the web app that's running from that QR code. So we're doing the same thing. And banging on it. And I'm going to close with where I want it to go in our next web app on the phone, which is actually to make it swing. It's sort of like a church bell. And the final takeaway question is just something that I noticed a coincidence. QR codes look a lot like these meshes that I'm banging on, and there's no real reason for that. If anybody can explain it, please do. Thank you. So I'll hand it over to our next speaker at this point.
Thank you, Chris. That's amazing. Thank you also, Lucas, for making sure that we could all hear that pretty important aspect. Christopher, please jump in.
I'm also Chris, but Chris and Chris are always too complicated. So, so let me hold on a second. Let me also share these slides. So, a second here. And also I'll make sure I share the sound as well. It's always good that when sound people forget to turn the sound on. So, okay. So I'm Chris Salter. Actually, I help with Lucas make this connection with Chris Chafe, who's an old friend and prof of mine when I was studying at Stanford many years ago. I'm artist and professor of immersive arts at the Zurich University Arts, which is the largest art school in Switzerland, one of the largest in Europe. I run this giant immersive art space, which is a facility that does production, research, and teaching in the area of immersive arts. We can just define immersion as ways in which the human body interacts with and is embedded within, let's say, technological surrounds. That's another view of it. So for 20 years, I've been making large-scale installations dealing with the relation between the human senses and I said the technological environment in terms of light, sound, architectural space, and social interaction in those spaces. And I'm going to talk about an older project today, really quickly, which we did in 2012, but it's still actually being shown, called "And Polytope Behaviors in Light and Sound" after Ioannis Xenakis. Now, this is named after the work of the great Romanian Greek French composer Ioannis Xenakis, who studied civil engineering and also music with Olivier Messiaen, and was responsible for a very radical move in music already starting in the 1950s, which was to apply essentially probabilities to music composition, what he called stochastic music. Stochastic means essentially probabilistic, not random, but a distribution of unknown outcomes over a period of time. And what's interesting about this is, of course, most of the systems we now call generative artificial intelligence are based on the same principle. Xenakis in the 1960s created what he called polytopes, which is a neologism meaning many spaces, which were essentially very early media environments combining light, sound, and architecture toward what he called the steps toward an electronic gesture. And he said, because we have these electronic means, we can actually start to find new forms of synthesis between these different media. This is the original one in Montreal in 1967. And he realized another one in Paris, in Iran, and then finally with lasers, with light, with sound. All this was driven by very complex machinery at the time, computers that were not real time, and very much inspired by thinking about the relation between sound and architectural space. And this is the final polytope, which was the Diotope at the Centre Pompidou's opening in 1978. a pavilion that was actually supposed to move around the world. And unfortunately, it was so large, it only went to Bonn and then was destroyed. But also featured mass amounts of lights, multi-channels of audio controlled by computers. And what we imagined to try to think about is the question of how can a system of light and sound organize itself over time. And so we were trying to think at the time, what would it mean to start to work with new kinds of machine learning? This was in 2009, 2010, techniques that would essentially both capitalize on Xenakis' interest in this kind of instability of media. And in some ways, we wanted to understand how do the light and sound organize themselves. So what happened in this project is you essentially have 170 LEDs and then multiple speakers across a giant wireless sensor network built across this massive architectural span in space, which was shaped very much like Xenakis' interest in what are called hyperbolic paraboloids, especially ruled surfaces in which you create a curve from straight lines. And these lights and sound basically organize themselves over what's now called reinforcement learning, which is a technique in which a computer agent takes some kind of action and is given either a reward, i.e. a numerical value, or a punishment. And then depending on what those nodes do, or what those agents do, they take another action. So what you watch in this project is the organization of a kind of mass of media elements trying to structure themselves over time. And I just go to the video. This has been shown in many places, and it's very site specific in the various locations we showed it in. But now I will quit this slide and just quickly scan through that video. I'm just going to scan through it. So basically, you have all these lights and just watching their behavior over time was interesting. So at times, these things organize themselves in very structured ways. At times, they move into a kind of field of noise. And then what you also have is you have multiple tiny speakers, 100 of those, that produces tiny sounds that act as a kind of mass. And this is what Xenakis was interested in. He was interested in sound not as a series of notes, but rather like the fall of rain or the flowing of sand, multiple grains or small sonic actions that add up to a kind of statistical mass. And what's interesting, and there are different algorithms that run in this project. For instance, these different lights are trying to synchronize themselves like fireflies might. You have also a system that essentially organizes itself in terms of chasing, it's running a cellular automata. So basically it starts to create kind of very fast movement. Then you have certain kind of random actions, a random walk. So these kinds of agents that are in software are basically mapped out into physical space and controlling essentially this, let's say, flow of light and certainly of sound. And the question I want to leave everybody with is, what would it mean to organize sound, perceptual media like sound and light in a non-human way, in a kind of, or let's say other than human way, through statistical processes that no human could actually construct and no human could actually steer. So that's where we'll leave it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Really fantastic projects from the three of you, all talking about very different aspects, but also overlapping interests. And I'm struck by a few different things that each of you have said and wanting to maybe dive in a little bit more. Chris, I'm loving what you're saying about this idea of sound as mass and aspects of accumulation. And I'm also kind of interpolating or interpreting a little bit of that from Chris Chafe's work too, that these are the sum of these different kind of nodes coming together and the product of that interest and collaboration in a way. Christopher Salter, you're also kind of creating a platform that's referencing Xenakis, and Nina, you're creating a platform for other artists to then explore their priorities around sound. For Nina, I'm curious if your platform, this idea of the decentralized, if there's priorities in there around sound as noise or sound as music or the type of experience that this platform is attempting to offer.
So in the first example that I shared, we concentrated on music, but invited also musicians that are practicing more experimental music as well, or sounds. But the second one, which I don't see as a platform, but more as a commissioned piece that came together, but not knowing what the others were playing. So I see it as a musical piece that, yeah. And they all played electronics, and it was more experimental or more noisy than the radio shows. But I think it also, yeah, it is dependent on the setting. Yeah. And also to circle back, the shows were commissioned to create a sonic space for the sculptures because we knew that no one will be there. So there is also the layer, also, yeah, it's always a question of how to address the audience. And with audience, I don't exclude objects or artworks in my case.
So in the sense of this, the kind of radio station, are you also imagining that there is a shared listening space for this, or are people able to just tap in on their own, or is there a priority in your mind?
So for the first example, we had a radio in the exhibition space that was airing the shows that were on air. Exactly. Yeah. And for the second piece, as it only happened once, and I traveled to Rennes by myself, and yeah, wanted to somehow share the commission pieces with the broader audience. I wrote a little instructions to peers and friends, and I invited them to experiment how it could sound if we use multiple devices and if we tune in, and yeah, because there were delays, mistakes happen, so we always have this unknown aspect that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that idea of kind of multiple nodes. I'm kind of thinking of the opportunity that Chris Chafe's project opens up with so much exploration of this tool to create a digital version of a physical world, in a sense. And maybe Chris, you could talk a little bit about that interplay between what we experience physically and how we achieve that, using technology and science. You're muted, Chris.
No, I'm not. Okay, thanks. Yeah, for, deep time, I guess we would say again, that making music, making sound, humans have always looked on things to bang on. I mean, but let's say in a more sophisticated way to communicate sound, listening ideas and structures that we call music, and that goes so far back. It's so ubiquitous across the planet and in time. Maybe the original instrument is our voice, so biologically, we're equipped both on the making and the receiving side of things. And when we bring ourselves into the modern era of modeling with computers, we're building still instruments and we're building listeners. The frontier is always fresh, right? And as technology changes, it gets these kind of big shifts. But what's really deeply important, I think, is back to the original works and like Nina's work, where you confront what is possible and you start to kind of let it blossom, become its own life with its own implications, which then become very communicative. And so there's this kind of ebb and flow of these sorts of things, like the project I just showed, which kind of underpins sometimes what you can do on the artistic side, but doesn't dominate it. Hopefully, that it's there for the using. And in my own work, it's kind of like a two-sided thing. Like I'll take advantage of discoveries, but I'll also ask myself for more. And when we go into subsequently, we'll go into the Karma listening room, and the two folks who are going to take us through that, these are experts in using three-dimensional space as a medium also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And an evocative medium. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what's up. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved what you were saying earlier about this idea that the third dimension is the cave, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we think about the objects that emit sound first, and then we think about the space kind of
Mm-hmm.
almost secondarily. And I was really struck, Christopher, by kind of seeing the different iterations of this and Polytope project and how radically transformed they were by the spaces that they were inhabiting. I mean, one was inside of an empty swimming pool, one was underneath a bridge. Obviously, Xenakis was so fluent in this intersection between architecture and sound and acoustics. So, from your perspective, from your experience, how are these spaces really shifting our perception?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly. I mean, for instance, as a good example, we showed this work at the Vitra Design Museum in the Buckminster Fuller, one of the Buckminster Fuller Synergetics domes, which are essentially the company that Fuller founded with his partner and then produced these essentially geodesic domes. And in that space, because it was a sphere and also a dome, essentially a dome-like shape, we had specific large scale sound elements, speakers in certain areas. And because of that architecture, that it created absolutely mirror images on the other side of the room where there were no speakers. So it actually was exactly like, because of the architecture, the mirror shape. And other places, it was based, sometimes it was much flatter in terms of its expanse, and then we would scale these cables in different heights and in different positions. What's quite interesting is that in the case, I was just thinking a lot about the question about model that came up. And in fact, like Nina's work is very much dealing with this kind of model between the exhibition space and then, of course, the radio, which is the acoustic space. Chris has from long been interested in this relation between like the internet as a source of signal processing, then, of course, also of communication. In that sense, the model, it resembles an interesting thing that my old friend Joel Ryan said, which was, when you're building computer models for sound, it's basically, he says something like phantom models with physical handles. In the sense that you have this virtual acoustic model that's computational, but of course then you interact with it in a physical way, whether it's on the phone or in a physical space. And then in Polytope, we're using models in the sense of how they're now being used, which is essentially mathematical representations that point to things in the real world, but of course are mathematical configurations of that. Now, people start to confuse in AI models the representation with the reality. But in this Polytope project, those models are virtual, and then they produce real acoustic and visual and perceptual effects. So people are inside that, about this notion of mass, they're inside this mass of sound and light. There is only a partial perspective. There is never a place where one can see the entire apparatus. So one is somehow incorporated within it. So very much those spaces, how you approach, many people lie down in this thing for hours watching the behavior of this thing, trying to understand, is there a logic? Is there a form of order? Is this disordered? Is it random? Is it structured? And it's this kind of, and the spaces condition those forms of perception.
I think those are questions that we ask ourselves every day. Is it logic? Is it order? Is it chaos?
Yeah.
So these are microcosms of our larger world, and it's interesting to use sound as a way to kind of distill the more the broader cosmic, spiritual questions that might exist. So what I've gathered, from seeing your installation just through the video, through the screen, is that you're really picking up on some of these almost biological sensibilities, that there's this relationship of entities that's at play here, which is really interesting. And in that sense, like, your project can be considered a kind of tool or an asset where you're testing something and getting feedback, and testing and getting feedback. Similarly, Chris is testing, getting feedback. It's this tool, as you were talking about, or this asset. And then, I feel like on kind of a cultural space, this idea, Nina, that you have of seeing what happens when you provide an opportunity for others to experiment, and then you kind of are adding into this big tent idea of exploring, what are the limits of sound, or maybe it's all limitless, but what are different avenues of exploration, which is really great.
It's interesting. There's a very interesting question in the chat that picks up, I think, on that. Or this person asked, this is fascinating, conceptually and perceptually, what's at stake in these works? Are they referring to stakes out in the world, or are they internal somehow, referring to the artistic, the aesthetic object itself? I mean, I think this is a very interesting question. We could also throw through to all of us.
Yeah, let's go. Do you have a thought on that?
Well, I leave for Nina and Chris first to respond, because I think it's a great question. So
Credit to Peter, I think, in the chat. Peter.
Yeah, Peter Linnet. Yeah.
Boy, Nina, go ahead if you'd like. Yeah.
Please go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's both personal and it's also something that has extents that I don't know the limits of. A little bit like what Joseph was saying, that we throw things out there, as artists, we probably pursue things that, even the rhythms on those gongs that I was playing, those are really fascinating to me in a musical way. They have origins outside of music, but they come into music. And I like to think that turns around too, that the music and the spaces that we create to make music, like we've been talking about, become greater. And they have aspects which might, we could sometimes make analogy to ritual and to, sort of implications beyond, just the medium itself. So that's partly what's at stake. And I don't have a solid answer for this myself, but that's actually why it's fun. So keep working, keep discovering. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, it creates also a social space. Maybe this is where I can dock on. I mean, I also really liked, Joseph, how you took the term model and put us all into a relation. Maybe I can expand there a little bit. Through listening to my peers, especially in 2022, I realized that there is and it sounds maybe a bit dramatic, but some base needs are at stake, and within redistributing the whole or a bigger part of the production fund, we not only gave but there were many people, so it was also symbolic, but we could redistribute some money and some visibility. And I think this is the greatest thing about sound or the practice of listening, because we react to what we've heard, and we create something out of it, and it can go in all the directions, or in many, as we heard also today. So and I think this is the beauty about sound or art.
Yeah.
I have a response to this question. From the position of Xenakis. So Xenakis grew up during the Second World War and actually fought in the Greek resistance, and was, after the war, when the military government took over Greece, he was condemned to death. That's why he went in exile in France. And he described his experience of growing up and listening to the bombs falling in Athens during the war. And when you listen to his music still today, it especially compared to a lot of music that was written about the time, which is very academic, this music has a kind of intensity that is difficult to quantify and to even describe. It's somehow ineffable. You listen and you cannot understand it. It's so dense and so complex, but not in an academic way, in a kind of absolutely assaultive way, but also beautiful way of listening to all of these multiple kinds of groupings of glissandos and this mass, as Joseph said, of sound. And what's so interesting about Xenakis today, and this is where I think the stakes are, we are now living in a world that is about the relation between order and noise. So if everyone's using a diffusion model, and making images, you're using noise to do those images. So noise is absolutely in all of our statistical and mathematical and scientific understanding of things. And what's so interesting, we're living in this world of probability. We're living in a world where actually our actions, our perception are being shaped by probabilistic frameworks, even though we don't know this. This is what the black boxes of artificial intelligence are doing. And so this idea of not knowing where order lies, and trying to grasp that, is perhaps one of the most high-stake questions we have now. And of course, art, tries to capture that moment of the ineffable or the explosive, when all other things fail,
I love that. This idea of the stakes of knowing, like that is what is at stake, is attention, is dissection, is analysis, but the ability to have the intentionality to pay attention. And as Chris said earlier, this idea of building listeners, I think that is what the stakes are, that all of these projects together are about, it's about attunement. If you take the time to participate, either as a creator or there is no such thing as being a passive listener, really, because it's all generative. And I think that that's incredibly important to then become the mechanism with which we use to build, as you were saying, Nina. The transition into building creatively is the building block of that is to be able to listen intentionally. Amazing. Great. It was a great question. We have maybe time for a couple more questions. One I see in the chat here, a few here. One from Dan Davis. Perhaps our ears create the order we want. If we allow machines to make random choices with sound, do they create something that we perceive as natural or something unnatural?
Yeah, wow, okay. There's all those terms, natural and not natural, which we might also qualify
Right.
what they mean.
Right, right, right. Let me go to a project that I have continually in my life, which is brewing beer. And
Right.
is a vat of beer that is bubbling away, fermenting, is that a machine?
Hmm.
Is the rhythm of the bubbles which then accelerate in the beginning and then decay over 5 days is that has a complete comportment to it, a behavior, and in the micro time of the bubble, there's something that's never periodic but almost periodic, and I can listen to that for hours, and I can put it in with a bunch of musicians, and whatever that machinery is, I guess it's a biological machine, is something that becomes internalized, and those bubbles become really familiar, and I can predict if things are going okay or not down there in the bottle, right? So it's this crossing back and forth.
Hmm. I think it points to just how slippery that question is of in this in this day and age, what is real and what is not real.
And what is natural,
Mhm.
and I mean, is it like when Xenakis basically takes, for instance, the theory of Boltzmann's theory of gases, which of course have to do with random behavior of molecules, and then you apply that to instruments, where it's you're not essentially composing the direct notes, you're composing the structure that, or let's say trying to give a shape to a structure that emerges over time. And so the way those things interact are not necessarily predictable. You can't control them. So there's always this fine line between control, in perception too, right? Between control and a certain level of liberation,
Mhm.
and sometimes people find, if you go listen to a band like Merzbau or a musician like Merzbau, it's just people can't find any order because it's just a wall of shattering noise. But of course, people find in all these micro structures and things in it. So, and of course, as we know, like sound is not just given. You have to train your ears. You have to train a hearing perspective on the world. It just doesn't, you don't just you're born with ears, but it doesn't mean those ears are going to be, attuned to the world. So you have to listen, you have to pay attention to how the world actually sounds. I mean, that's what our Murray Schafer says. Like, what does it mean to the world to sound? If you walk by architecture where you suddenly have the sounds of things ricocheting off of surfaces, and so we're this is how, you have to essentially tune your senses. They're amazing instruments, but
Mm.
without tuning them, they basically, kind of become latent in response. So
Maybe there's an extension of that in somewhere in the question from James Galt here about the idea of spaces themselves. James is asking how the design of how the work of each of you can inform the design of new buildings that are not built specifically as performance spaces, but spaces for gathering and common usage.
Oof.
yeah, I mean, I mean, I just say Xenakis is really interesting because Xenakis worked in Le Corbusier's studio. And when Le Corbusier was in India doing Chandigarh, a city in northern India, Xenakis took over. And it's interesting, Xenakis did this amazing monastery in France, La Tourette. And there is a series of windows, and these windows are just have different frame sizes and different places where the braces and the kind of holders are different sizes. And so as the sun comes through those windows, you get this rhythmic play of sun as you walk through this particular hallway. So this adds a kind of level to that space of dynamics. Of course, Le Corbusier's work is very concrete and very hard and very, doesn't feel very human. So in the way Xenakis thought about rhythm in architecture is really interesting, and it's not about use value. It's really somehow about trying to give an atmosphere or quality to space, that you notice, but it's not screaming at you. So it's interesting to think about like how time is shaped by by like artistic decisions.
Yeah, I think it's a really incredible opportunity that more architects should be taking advantage of, is our acoustic sensibilities and tapping into that as a way to situate ourselves and create dedicated frames of mind. And I think about, there's a vault in Grand Central Station in New York. Many of these types of vaults are in buildings all over the world, but it's kind of an urban artifact where people now know that if they stand in one corner of the vault, they can hear the whisper of a companion on the other side of the room. And it's not part of the intentionality of the structure itself, but it is now an experience that people go to have because they understand, I hate to use the word novelty, but that there is something acoustic that they don't traditionally get to experience, the transference of sound across this space. And so the opportunity for architecture is to create these moments of wonder that become unifying and that become takeaways, from at the same level that, when we think about the importance of a building like Bilbao, it's not just about the aesthetics. It's really operating on all of our senses. We're at 10, and I want to tee up Jason to bring us into Karma and introduce the space in Karma. But before I do that, I just want to say a huge thanks to Chris, and Nina for the super enlightening conversation and to learn more about your work. And of course, to Swissnex for hosting this series of conversations. It's been so wonderful to be a participant in this. So thank you. And we're gonna pass it over to Jason, who's gonna explain a little bit about the room that he's in, and then we'll have about 20 minutes at least to kind of tune in to that space.
This is very fun. I'm actually standing next to Headley. Headley is a binaural microphone that's set up to represent the room I'm in. And the room I'm in is the listening room at Karma that Chris has overseen. I don't know the specific development, how it occurred, but it is an amazing space that I'll describe by saying I'm standing on a grid below which are a ring of 6 to 8 speakers, 6 speakers that project sound from below. There's a ring of...
There's one at the top.
There's one at the top.
6.
And there's 6 around.
8.
And then 8 this way with...
6 and 1 at the bottom.
And a lot of subwoofers as well. So what we have here is this immersive space that's created for listening. It's called the listening room. And we're here to sort of talk about space and listening as one would then implement a speaker array and the effects that we can then simulate. And it's really fascinating because what we're able to do is translate all kinds of experiences like this. We can create what sounds like a symphony, like a mosque or a cathedral or a cave within this space. And we can also listen to music. And so we're going to explore that. I'm going to hand it over to Fernando and Constantine, who are here and creators of this space and manage the space. And it's just such a pleasure to be here and to acknowledge, both the work of Chris, the work of Constantine and Fernando, because the space is incredible. It also feels really cool. So it's not just an acoustic space. It also has a visual. It's very comfortable. You have these blue lights. It's very engaging. And so my hope here is to just share this space. We're not trying to replicate it. You have to come here to really get the experience. But hopefully Headley, who's a binaural mic, will be able to capture that. And I just want to say one tagline here to say we're having another one of these sessions coming up in July. I believe it's July 28th, and it's going to be specifically talking about architecture and the design of a possible sound museum. So it's kind of a segue to the last question and spaces that can be built, not just within a small space like this, but imagine an institution that had multiple places like this where you could hear different experiences as well as the kind of architectural acoustics. So we're going to continue that conversation in our next session. For now, I want to hand it over to who wants to go first? Constantine. Okay, I'm just gonna. We're here. I don't know if people have to stand by the head or how it's going to work, but we're now in the experimental part of this. We're going to play some stuff.
Okay, should I start with which one?
I think you should start with the spaces, and then go to the and the voices. Those are, and then go to the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, the spaces is Constantine. He's starting. Okay. So this is a long-running project of capturing spaces in the world and bringing them to our spaces so that you can be somewhere else sonically. And now Constantine has started the listening room anymore. Where is it we are, Constantine?
Yeah, we're in Hagia Sophia now.
We are right now in Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, Turkey. Huge space, used to be a mosque, then fight, a cathedral, fight, a mosque again, then a secular space. So you can hear, hopefully, the very long reverberant time. And what does it look as? If you speak, you will be in here as well.
Hello, how's it going?
So you can all hear the reverberant space, and Constantine is manning the technical station and can actually switch us to different spaces. So where are we going?
Can we go to a cave?
Shall we go to a cave, yeah.
Okay, this is
Chauvet cave.
Constantine is saying we're in Chauvet, in France. So it's a much smaller space.
And then let's go to San Lorenzo.
San Lorenzo.
And then this is a mosque, a Shah mosque. Hello?
This has a lot of flutter echo.
I'd like to take a moment now, too, to just ask a question of the audience. And Lucas, are you hearing these effects well through the transition through the microphone? Because that's one of the things we want to try to check is like, how does this translate to an online audience? And I think what we're able to do is show what it's like. If you're in the space, it's actually very, very present. It feels very different for each of these spaces. So I hope you can get that comes across. And Constantine, there was some singing, too, that was really clear when we had a choral voice in the mosque, I believe, and then you can hear it both as a dry experience and then how it translates to the space. And I think if that's possible to share, that would be cool. And we're doing a little technical crossover here.
An early recreation of the Hagia Sophia space. So this is not done in real time, but it's 8 singers of the Capella Romana group specializing in Byzantine chanting. There will be panned around you and they will be inside this virtual space that we created.
Wait, I turned it on here, but I turned it on the machine.
Just the singers recorded dry with no space, which is horrible, right? And they can't sing like this. They need something to support their singing.
Now we're just going to hear the end to hear the decay of the space.
It's almost 11 seconds of decay time.
So I hope that was translated well for the online audience. And in the space, I just want to say I'm also getting the sense of sound coming from below. I'm standing right in the middle, above, all the way around. And that's the kind of experience that's possible in the room. And now we're going to switch to something else, which is a really, we listened to this yesterday. And, you know, what Chris was talking about was the sort of evolution of object resonance. And this is Fernando's take on his kitchen implements. So everything in what we're going to hear is based on Fernando's kitchen, the timer of his toaster, I believe, and some of the implements, cake, sheet metal, cooking sheets, etc. So anyway, I won't go into much detail because you just have to hear it. So we'll start this and just have about, we'll give you some listening time. So about 5 minutes, more or less. We'll just let it run.
So that you understand, all these little clicks that you hear are the recording originally of the mechanical timer of a toaster oven, which has been processed and multiplied in a computer. There's a lot of granular synthesis, analysis, and resynthesis of tones. There's cookie sheets, trivets, plates. And this is generated with non-real time synthesis, and the final output of a program is a 24-channel sound file. Problematic for Zoom because of the high dynamic range. this kind of bouncing tails of sound are the analysis of those hits that you just hear and stretched.
We're going to just switch to the end now just to get the finale, I guess. Lovely. I just want to say my observation too, listening here in the space, is that it's tactile. There's a haptic sensation of the sound in the room that you can't really translate online, but it's immensely satisfying to hear all that sound in its dynamic range in the space.
And for those of you with headphones, the experience depends on how close your earlobes are to the ones on Headley. So if this shape is the same, your experience will be almost perfect, but it's not going to be, because we're all different. Just look around. And
we all have different ear prints, is what I like to say.
Yeah, and your brain has been trained to work with your ears, not with Headley's ears.
But the
this is Joseph beaming in to the room. I've put my AirPods into my ears, and it's been amazing to actually just close my eyes and experience this and really be transported into different spaces. And then to be able to open them and kind of understand that I'm experiencing the space that you're standing in as an iteration of a space that's being created computationally.
Yeah. You know, at Spaces, it's interesting that's a good segue to our next sample, which is Constantine's going to play a piece that is I think it's called Dreaming Blind, but I won't use the exact title, but it has to do with a blind person dreaming, going through various different spaces, all articulated by opening and closing a door. And it's really, really great for just what you were saying. Close your eyes and you're transported through these various kinds of acoustic spaces, you know, and it's musical, but it's also just very tangible sound. So I think we can try that next.
It's called Dreaming in Darkness.
Dreaming in Darkness.
And the composer is Aku Parmarud.
Aku
Parmarud.
Parmarud. So this is a good one to close your eyes and listen. So that's just an excerpt of this Dreaming in Darkness. How long is that piece?
About 8 minutes long,
So
9 minutes long, I think.
8 or 9 minutes transporting through various spaces. And, you know, that's that's kind of the extent of the things we've chosen to listen to today. And we could, you know, continue to listen. It's like an endless supply. There's students who have worked here. There's composers who have come and done residencies. Maybe just talk a little bit about the kinds of work that's done here.
At the listening room?
Yeah, just in general, and Karma maybe.
Pretty much everything. I mean, we're an interdisciplinary research center, and Chris would be more appropriate to say this. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I think you're appropriate too. Sorry.
Oh,
but
one more thing before I forget.
Yeah.
You know, all this Zoom magic and 3D sound with Headley and everything wouldn't happen without Konstantin.
Yeah.
Who is, you know, he's a magician for that part. I mean, it's he did his work yesterday. In 5 minutes, we had everything running, and
That includes the visuals, which for
Yeah.
sound people, I had that role last time, and I did a terrible job. And I really appreciate Konstantin's work with the visuals and the representation of the space virtually, which is a really, it's kind of one of the questions we've been asking ourselves, and I particularly am interested in how to translate spatial audio, which is a very immersive physical experience that can only really be had in the present space, how to do that digitally. And this is one example I hope that you've heard. It sounds, at least it represents a very good rendition of it. And I think when we go forward in the series, we want to do that. We've been, you know, the last time we did this, we showed you the Art of Noise exhibition and the listening room for that space. And the next one, we're going to probably do something else, hopefully maybe at Audium in San Francisco. We haven't yet finalized, but we're kind of trying to do a tour of these kind of spaces and represent them virtually. And just caveat, this real experiences can only be had in the present. So we're not trying to replicate it. We're just saying, here it is. Look at this amazing creation and appreciate it. And imagine, take this kind of beginning place and imagine it translated into a museum, where a public access space that could have membership, where people could come all the time and just come into this space and listen. That's what I hope to create with this idea. But now it's these, you know, incredible laboratories. These are laboratories where this work is being done. And I wanted, what is there anything else to say? I want to maybe we open it up.
Chris was going to Chris, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I think you've said it very well already, but it is a lab. It's an experimental space, and it's driven by, music and artistic, imagination coupled to scientific and engineering expertise. And it's a large university, Stanford. There are fields that touch on sound and music in ways that we're always discovering anew. It's great. So Karma is privileged to have probably the best building on campus, and deep inside it are dungeons for what you've just experienced, and as well as labs for brainwave imaging of musicians in real time while they're playing music and that sort of thing. So I won't call it a playground, but it really is. I've had so much fun doing what I do there with the team that's there, and that's really what makes a center like that, is the people. And so again, I want to thank Fernando Lopez-Escano, composer, engineer, maintainer of that room, Konstantin Basica, who is, as Nando just said, magician with being able to live stream and do multimedia art pieces that are, just pushing the frontier all the time. So each of them, they're doing this because their own heart and work is in it. But they're sharing it with the group. And I'll maybe close the Karma side of things by saying this is an open invitation to be in touch with me or any of who you've met today, to come by and visit it yourself. It's always a pleasure to be able to share the fun that we're having. So thanks for your amazing efforts, you guys. It sounded incredible. I was not ever expecting Zoom to sound so good, and it does. It's really working.
One last detail is that we're not showcasing that space today, but this room has only 22 speakers, or 23. We have a bigger space, which is our small concert hall up in the third floor, and that has a dome, so it's not full 3D, but it has 56 speakers and 8 subs. So we can do much more precise and enveloping things up there.
I looked at that space yesterday too, and it's beautiful. Just the whole arrangement with visuals as well. And I know that one of the things we mentioned earlier in the conversations was that space was designed to actually translate spatial audio during COVID, because obviously that wasn't a time when we could come into these spaces, and the technology breakthroughs that actually occurred with Zoom, with spatial audio translation and visuals into these kind of performances that can be spread worldwide. That's something that Karma has really taken to another level. And that space upstairs is incredible.
Yeah, Konstantin has added all this audio-visual equipment, lights, and everything, so we can stream. All our events now are streamed live in binaural with proper, almost movie quality video and audio and long-term archival for the composers. It's an amazing work that Konstantin has put together. If you looked at the number of little splitters and mergers and video equipment that tries to keep everything together, it's insane.
I just want to jump in and say a huge thanks to everyone for being, for all the attendees and for the participants and the panelists. Thank you, Jason, for bringing us into Karma, and to everybody for bringing, such interesting conversations around sound. I mean, I didn't expect this to feel so successful, being in this space. So thank you to Fernando and Konstantin for facilitating that, to Christopher Salter and Chris Chafe, and to Nina and Emge. Really wonderful conversation. And thank you again to Lucas and Swissnex for bringing us all together. Session number 3. To invite all of you back for that. Lucas, if you can remind us that date one more time.
Yes, there will be another Tuesday, July 28th at the same time.
Great. Yeah, and I think with that, we can wrap it up.
Thank you all so much. That was
Thanks,
fantastic.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day or night, wherever you are.
Thank you.
See you.